Welcome to the 14th session. We are using Indian knowledge systems here for creating a well-being curriculum that meets the new global goal of education. We saw in the earlier session that Indian knowledge system or Bharatiya knowledge system's ways of knowing, Pratyaksha Praman, Anumana, Upaman and Shabda Praman were always an international curriculum. In this session, we will compare IKS and CKS's ideas of character and personality development. We will explore why, despite similarities in symbols, do IKS and CKS have different approaches to developing character and personality. Well, to achieve the global goal of education, OECD's Learning Compass wants to develop attitudes, values, transformative competencies. We are continuing to explore how Indian knowledge system can do this. We have seen that the goal of IKS and CKS is to get inner happiness and well-being. However, the way of achieving this goal is different in both these traditions and these systems of education. While currently the current knowledge system is using sense perception as the first way of knowing, but it's not realizing the limitations that it can only explore the outer world, and the nature of the world as we see it through our two eyes is to keep changing. Hence, happiness and well-being that is being created through the current approach, the current knowledge system, is bound to keep fluctuating. IKS, however, believes that it seeks to develop character and personality to awaken the inner voice of conscience. This is a stable source of taking decisions, a stable source of viewing reality. And IKS finds that inner happiness can be attained by activating the voice of conscience and exploring the inner world. This creates well-being for the individual and society. Is building character being achieved right now? What is IKS's way? Universal vision begins by seeing the universe differently. Any universal vision. At Nalanda and Takshila, the vision of IKS gave an international curriculum. See this video and imagine that creation and time are at their point of origin. It is obvious that movement has caused the universe. There must have been some movement for things to begin. Imagine the movement from nothingness. Space has moved to create air, wind, time too is bound to the process of movement and change. It is emerging along with fire, the element that is powering the earth's source of heat, the sun. If all of creation has the same source, can your source be different from it? Write arguments for and against this view. Then see this video. Imagine yourself as the creator, and you are absorbing all the phenomena back into yourself, into the mind and beyond it too, if possible. Let there be a totally peaceful state of mind. Do you experience anything? It need not be expressed in words. Carry that experience, especially if it is nothing. Try to recapture the nothingness or shunyata that Buddha talks of within. Current knowledge system has used Anuman, Upaman or inference and comparison with sense perception to draw many conclusions about creation and its processes. However, its study couldn't prevent social pain. how can there be a relationship of understanding of the universe with preventing social pain? Some may laugh at the very conception of this idea. But IKS's approach is different. It sees the infinite cosmos as being reflected in the smallest atom. Its inquiry thus starts with unity behind diversity. Let us see the ideas of current knowledge system first. An article posted in Northeastern University, USA's website some time ago admitted that it is possible to succeed without going to college. It says, and I quote, "Bill Gates started Microsoft when he was 19 and has since become one of the world's wealthiest people. Mark Zuckerberg owns one of the most highly valued tech companies in the US. Steve Jobs founded Apple in his garage. What do these three people have in common? None of them finished college. In fact, Bill Gates is considered Harvard's most successful dropout." Unquote. It then defines the idea of success. I quote, "People define success in different ways. For some, it means having enough money to buy the things they want. For others, it means being respected by your peers. For some, it simply means having a loving and supportive family." Unquote. You can check the link of this article in the lecture notes. What is success? Achieving full human potential is success in Indian knowledge system. It is Maslow's idea of transcendence. Education should be able to enable it. Both education and lack of it can create money. But will the creation of wealth prevent social pain? That question is not included in current ideas of success. The new goal of OECD leads us to ask this question. The new goal of education is a new beginning. IKS would say that fulfilling it needs a new way of understanding of the universe, not just education. What is the first thing IKS learnt by observing the universe? What was the guide it took from that to commence education? IKS concluded that creation is in a state of dynamic balance. It analyzed that there is so much diversity that it may be impossible for a human mind to grasp the complexity of everything. It therefore sought to know that one thing knowing which everything else can be known. Behind an unimaginable complexity, it saw an underlying unity. It explored within the self, within the atom, and within the universe for it. With such a revelation or pratyaksha pramana, it started investigating the truth of the universe. IKS used anumana or inference to conclude that sense perception is the first tool to investigate the multiplicity of the universe. It further inferred that using upamana or comparison can help it make full use of the diversity in nature to create personal comforts and what we call wealth today. However, to create the same dynamic balance that is in the universe, IKS creates a revelation that first this state of dynamic balance must be created by education within the individual. Only a dynamic balance can comprehend another dynamic balance. For experiencing the absolute balance that caused creation, that absolute balance should be created within. Its Vishisht Advaita philosophy of education creates dynamic balance. Advaita creates absolute balance. Thus, Indian knowledge systems begins differently in comprehending the universe. In IKS, inner and outer world are linked. Pratyaksha pramana or sense perception and anumana and upamana, that is comparison and inference, are guided by the inner voice of conscience. Despite the increase in global wealth by many highly educated and less educated people in the last 150 years, social pain persisted. Evidently, the ways of knowing of CKS are inadequate. A new beginning in education that can fulfill OECD's goal of well-being is IKS's Shabd Pramana way of knowing. IKS works on awakening the voice of conscience within each student along with imparting theory or knowledge. That is why this series is as much about personal practice as it is about IKS approach to Pratyaksha Pramana using Anumana and Upamana inspired by Shabda Pramana. The Shad Darshan are the backbone of its thought leadership. Hence, both the real world and the inner world need to be explored together in IKS. They are like two wings of a bird. IKS believes that only if a bird flies with both wings can it sustain its flight. These wings are CKS and IKS. Hence, only when IKS is added to CKS will sustained flight of society on the journey of well-being start. Knowledge comes with inquiry, but the inquiry into the nature of oneself gives insights of wisdom. The latter is the guide to the former's ways of knowing in IKS. How may IKS investigation into the subtle start? Let us explore this ourselves. Did creation start with the subtle or gross forms of the universe or universes? Can we trace ourselves back to the origin? It is obvious that gross bodies did not emerge immediately. Light, heat are popularly identified with the origin. In the space of the sky, air must have moved, and time is a dimension that is one measure of movement. The subtle led to the gross world that we recognize. Plants, animals, humans, and inanimate objects. That's what we recognize. IKS uses the gross world to learn about the subtle aspects of creation. It does so by closely observing nature. In awe of its multiplicity, it seeks not to get confused by it. Just as it observes nature, it observes each individual too. As humans with the same body functions react differently to the same situation, it concludes that mind or man is the cause. Hence, its study of humans is a study of man, or the human mind, the nature of the mind. To study anything, say chemistry, we seek to find out the properties, that is both physical and chemical. This leads to further investigation. Similarly, IKS closely studied not only properties of matter in nature, but human nature too. It concluded that all humans have a body and these bodies perform similar body functions like breathing, growing, decaying, and they are guided by a similar need for food, etc. Yet if the source is sitting on a chair, their different behavior shows that there are many sources of their actions, a multiplicity of sources, as there are a multiplicity of human minds. Yet we know that the source of creation can only be one. The gross elements in gross reality fulfill our lower order needs. If sense perception uses them with the subtle eye closed, then the one chair of the source of creation is seen as many, causing a confusing multiplicity. Social pain results when the spirit of work is missing. Current knowledge system is currently unable to create it, OECD concluded. This diagram shows different CKS and IKS approach to human transformation. It needs a full session to explain, but we summarize it here as follows. A sense perception based method of investigation, even for making comparison or drawing inferences, is aparavidya or worldly knowledge. Aparavidya. It may miss out the subtle spirit of work. The spirit of searching for unity behind diversity seeks it. That is, IKS seeks that one energy which activates all the visible multiplicity. IKS's commonality of human goals is practiced through common endeavors. It seeks to unlock and transform the human heart. The ability to look beyond the gross body, to see that the mind and the soul as the subtle and subtlest part of the same human being begins its paravidya, capturing our human spirit. This reveals the three levels of truth: the gross, the subtle, and the subtlest. Well-being, the new goal of OECD, is not a gross truth but a subtle truth. It will need education that can unlock the subtle human potential. This subtle truth makes the subtle interdependence of all human beings and of humans and nature obvious to the graduating student. Without this subtle understanding, only gross goals like prosperity, which serve myopic lower order needs of Maslow, are served in a manner, and this has resulted in social pain. Is human potential limited to causing social pain? OECD finds CKS was unable to create awareness of human potential. IKS instead seeks self-awareness to realize our human potential. IKS is about self-observation and self-discipline. It leads to self-awareness. A sense perception based inference or comparison of alternatives leads to seeking win-lose alternatives. A broader self-disciplined approach seeks win-win solutions instead. The latter creates well-being, not individual prosperity. When the summation of individual prosperity is done, it adds to a very large GDP accompanied by a lot of social pain. How does this self-discipline get initiated in IKS? It comes through pursuing its 4 goals of life, of which righteous conduct is the guide to the business of living life. The approach to desire fulfillment is guided by a subtle detachment from sense perception or the gross fruit of action. The right thing is done because it is the right thing to do, no other reason. Selfless love is shared with all, similarly, for no other reason. It is a natural expression of humanness. This emerges from a comprehension that the individual is more than the human body, whose mind's greed can far exceed its needs. It therefore seeks the subtlest of its subtle elements to achieve its subtlest need, to actualize human potential. The subtle mind is guided by the sense perception of the gross body towards greed, but the subtlest element, ether, guides the mind to seek excellence filled with goodness in human actions. Such an approach does not ignore the needs of the body, the family, society, but subsumes them in itself. As we travel up in our needs hierarchy, the needs become subtler, removed from earthy concerns. Elements too rise up from gross earth element to the subtle sky. Is the nature of truth changing with the move to subtlety? The truth of a hungry person is different from the truth perceived by a person whose stomach is full. How do we proceed to investigate the truth? IKS gives an example of this search through a story. The story is of Lord Varuna giving a simple instruction to his son Bhrigu before asking him to go and search for the truth. He told him that the truth will not be visible to the eyes. Instead, the truth is that which makes the eyes see and the ears hear. What did Bhrigu find? His conclusion, some may consider, was the same as the first stage of Maslow's need hierarchy. He concluded that subtle truth, which cannot be seen by the eyes or heard by the ears, is hunger. This is satisfied by food. Therefore, he concluded that food is God. When he told this to the father asked him to go back and search once again. This time he concluded that the body will be hungry only if it is alive. Life comes through breath. Hence he concluded that prana or life breath is the truth. His father again sent him back. This time he returned after concluding that the mind is the experiencer of everything and said that the mind is the truth. But we have seen that the 2008 recession was caused by using the human mind. Hence, that which directs the mind should be the truth. We should use education and find the truth, that truth. Bhrigu's father thus had to send him back. Then Bhrigu came back, concluding that wisdom in using the mind or spiritual wisdom is the truth. When his father sent him back, he never returned, for he had found everlasting bliss, the final goal. Now the father went to meet him and congratulate him. If truth, especially of using subtle mind, is misunderstood, it harms society. OECD found in 2008. What is truth, especially of the subtle mind? It found that it can cause social pain. Animals too have the same pangs of hunger and desire of food as humans. Many of them hunt for food. Their minds are not as developed as humans. Despite this, they do not hunt more than they need. This absence of greed maintains the balance in the jungle. Was greed the cause of 2008 recession and therefore the cause of OECD changing the goal of education from prosperity to well-being? Greed does lead to individual prosperity, but misdirected greed causes social pain too. Education should give a state of awareness that can guide the mind to avoid actions that cause social pain, those actions that harm others. Those are the ones that cause social pain. Therefore, education should help humans through contemplation to infer and realize that beyond the gross truth, there is a subtle truth of the mind. The subtle mind is capable of changing. It needs to be steadied through education. This will lead to disciplined observations which, collected over time, reveal Satyam, a higher level of truth. Such inferences will be more permanent. Still, it needs direction from the subtlest, unchanging truth, that which makes the eyes see, the ears hear, and powers creation to act within a study of limits. This is IKS's rhythm, the highest truth. The word right is derived from the word rhythm. What is the nature and description of truth? What is the highest truth? IKS's truth is only one. It is expressed and described in many ways. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. Electricity makes all appliances work. The appliances are many, but the electricity making them work is one. That is how truth of activity in creation is described. It represents unity in diversity. Comprehending this truth in IKS transforms human understanding. It clarifies that there is a basic unity that binds humankind. What is the guidance for individual behavior that this truth imparts? It leads those who realize it to act with humility. It leads them to discover their individuality, respect their nationality, and see a unity across nationalities, and extend the vision to all of creation. This leads to behavior that is socially and environmentally responsible. The fact that OECD changed the goal of education shows that it is searching for a way to fulfill a higher truth that is subtler than quantifiable prosperity. It now seeks well-being. A search for truth is the common purpose of both life and education. There are three ways to discover truth in IKS: by observation, pratyaksha pramana, by inference, anuman and comparison, and by experience, which comes from voice of conscience, shabda praman. The most efficient way is by experience. If a child touches fire, the experience is permanent. Similarly, if we experience that fire of sense perception burns reality, it will not be used as the only guide. CKS uses observation and inference too, but these are guided by sense perception, which can only see that truth whose nature is to keep changing, and not the subtlest that never changes. The subtlest truth is perceived only by experience. An experience of bliss is its highest, unchanging experience of the highest truth. Hence, IKS is about enabling an experience of the highest truth that creates unchanging well-being. This gets fructified with the use of its practices. Like subtle and gross aspects of creation, subtle and gross aspects exist within humans too. The subtlest thing whose transformation impacts actions immediately is the human heart. It is not the physical heart. Beyond swaying it by changing emotions, IKS views the subtlest, unchanging part of the heart as its goal of transformation. Each human body performs similar functions, yet each individual is unique. When IKS investigates in this manner, it finds that humans have the following: a body, a mind, an intellect, and apart from a physical heart, one exists which is moved by emotion and transforms human actions. Studying the body closely, IKS found that like everything else in nature, it too operates within a study of limits of body temperature, blood pressure, etc. What about the other aspects of mind, intellect, and heart? IKS concluded that these must be filled with an awareness of the truth of human potential through education. Education fills these three with the awareness of the truth of human potential. IKS finds that the human heart is transformed by instilling in it a deep desire to do the right thing. This awakens the voice of conscience within. This process starts if a habit of speaking the truth is inculcated. Without the right education, the human heart remains locked by a myopic vision of ideas of selfishness that led to many social and economic problems, including the 2008 recession. These lock the potential for well-being too. How can transformation occur? It found that the mind is the key that can open the lock of a closed, selfish mind. The key in turn can be guided by the hand of the intellect. Hence, IKS ideas of education help the intellect discriminate between good and bad. This creates well-being for both the individual and society. What is good and what is bad? Some may ask. What is the criteria used that judges all? IKS's study of nature showed that so long as everything follows its nature, there is a balance in creation. So what is human nature? If we find and stick to it, we will be in balance and create balance in society and with nature too. To identify this, IKS found that there are three components: the body, the mind, and a never-changing soul or Atma. The most subtle is an indestructible soul. Less subtle is the mind, and the body is gross, destructible matter. While CKS looks at the mind from the point of view of the body, IKS looks at the mind from a point of view of the soul. This is their difference. A focus on the body, IKS says, will lead to an uncontrolled mind, which will create social pain. IKS realizes that all may not recognize the subtle easily. Its primary concern is to find the way to tap human potential while living in the gross world. Thoughts in the mind or man power human life. These thoughts are directed by IKS to pursue 4 goals of life. These are like 4 wheels of a car. These goals become the 4 Purusharthas. They are the way in IKS to rise from the gross to the subtle. The first 2 of these Purusharthas are righteous conduct or dharma and declaration of distinction of humans from other species, what is called artha. Also, it is the way of business and the business of living life. The other 2 are desire fulfillment or kama and detachment from the fruit of action or mohakshaya, moksha. These goals should be paired correctly. Dharma should guide artha and kama should be guided by moksha. All actions should be done to declare the distinction of humans from other species. Desires should be fulfilled without gross attachments. If gross attachments guide desire fulfillment in business of life, problems will always occur. The introduction of the subtle in IKS is done through righteous conduct. This may require reflection before action that World Economic Forum and OECD now seek from education. This comes from the habit of seeking the truth in a situation. That is the switch which starts the car and makes it move on the path of righteous conduct. The 4 goals of life are based on righteous conduct. What is the right thing to do in any situation? This requires reflection before action. IKS ways of knowing depend on reflection before action because they don't just depend on sense perception. Reflection leads to subtle intuition. CKS depends on gross reality, which may be misleading sometimes. If it is not misleading, why would OECD seek reflections and the ability of anticipation before action in its learning compass? The ability to anticipate cannot come by seeing gross reality alone. If it was so, the economic recessions and social pain would have been anticipated, but they were not. The subtle reality is visible to a heart transformed, which can feel others' pain as one's own. Then, before doing actions, they can visualize perfectly how these actions would hurt all. This requires IKS's practices. This course lays a deep emphasis on practice. Every attempt is made to make all the lectures very short. A 5-minute slot at the end of this lecture is being given for silent sitting. This is to enable the participant to mull over what is said. Whatever has been heard should be repeated in the mind so that it gets absorbed. Just as sugar is stirred in a cup of tea or coffee with a spoon, use the spoon of silence to stir the sugar of Indian knowledge systems in your mind. It takes some time for the tea or coffee to become sweet. Patience is very important. The perspectives shared in the course will seem meaningful only if such silent sitting is done to mull over what has been said. Else, the half an hour spent in delivering the lectures will be a waste of time. We welcome you to undertake an inner journey during these 5 minutes. Only then will knowledge that is outside you will become wisdom inside you. The time allocated for this is actually 20 minutes, not 5 minutes. The time should be increased gradually. This is also a time for the mind to take rest. In case it cannot do that, mull over whether the voice of the conscience has guided you at any time in life till now. We accept challenges for the physical body in games. In a gym, we can have a 20 minutes plank challenge. We may exchange challenges on the quantity of food we can eat. Can we go beyond such challenges to the second step of the Indian knowledge systems? Can we see if the mind itself can take rest and maybe stop working? Can we explore what will happen if it becomes zero? Remember, it is not good to challenge the mind. It rebels and makes you do the opposite of what you want it to do. It is far simpler to observe the mind. For doing this, first the physical body should move as little as possible. Observe the mind as it tells the body to move. You are not telling the body to move, the mind is telling the body to move. Observe the mind. Move away from the mind and see what it is forcing the body to do. Watch the mind as if you are sitting on a fan at a distance. When you are at home, Shavasana in yoga is a good posture for this practice. Try to first silence the body, then the mind. For those who have mastered this, they can try the next method. When you think of nothing, can you experience love without giving it a shape of a thing like your favorite food or a thing that you want to own or the physical form of a person? Can it just be love without an emotion to a person or a thing? Can it be love for the sake of love? How do you experience loving yourself? The purpose of this course is to help you discover yourself, that loving being beyond the body and the mind.